Okay, so I'm glad to meet you, Peter and Richard. Just want to say that my family and I are huge fans of your father and his accomplishments. You, in your own right, have great accomplishments as well. You've completed the 7 summits, which is, the highest mountains in all 7 continents. You've climbed Everest twice, and you've taken up the cause of the Sherpa people and their culture. So thanks for taking the time to do an interview with me. Also joined with us is Richard Agnew, who works here at PwC as a director. So, both of you are successful in your own right. So can you first describe how your friendship started? I understand you both went to King's College, and that's where you met.
Yeah, we met as, young boys. Were you at King's Prep? I'm just trying to remember.
No.
And at King's College, so, in short pants and doing battalion and all of those sort of things at King's College here in Auckland. And then, basically, as so often happens, people march out the door at the end of their secondary education. Some people stay in touch. Some occasionally see each other, and many of us didn't see each other for years. And an old friend of ours organised some reunions. And it was amazing. It was wonderful to be reacquainted.
Were you both in the same classroom at all? I mean, did you know each other on that sort of level, or?
Yeah, well, there's quite a, there was 80, 100 people in our year group. So you all got to know each other, and as Peter has said before, is that while a lot of people hadn't seen each other for years, you soon remembered each other because of that 5 years of just being so close together.
Yeah. So being the son of Sir Ed, were you quite popular at school there? Did they all know exactly who you were?
We knew who Peter was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is about a school like King's is actually there were a lot of the sons of influential people.
Okay.
There was a lot of that, and in some respects that was certainly coming from a family like Ed Hillary's family was probably quite good for me. It was more of a level playing field.
So I guess were you more of a sports person back in school? Was Richard more into sort of maths and was it like that? Did you know you wanted to be a mountaineer back then at school at that age?
Look, I knew I loved the adventuring life, but just in my normal school career, I had all sorts of ideas. I thought I wanted to go into science, probably geology. So science was something I focused on, and I continue to have an interest in areas of the natural sciences. It's interesting how teachers and that education really does set you up for, look, it may not be even a career, it can just be an interest, and it certainly has been that for me.
Okay, so yeah, and during back in April, you decided to go on a reunion trek to Everest Base Camp in Nepal. So you went with 12 other of your former schoolmates. I understand. So before April 25th, before the earthquake, did you get a chance to rekindle your friendship and sort of enjoy the adventure a bit?
Look, I think that was the remarkable thing about the trip. I mean, we had a number of training walks, and it was just wonderful how we all. I mean, getting to know each other again, and it was sort of slow, and you're remembering. But when you're actually in Nepal, living together, having morning tea together, walking together, supporting each other up the big, switchbacked hillsides, huffing and puffing in the rarefied air, suddenly you're rekindling, you're building on that old friendship.
And the trip was 18 months in the making.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time it got to the March, April of 2015, just before we left, we were like excited little schoolboys once again. And to be led by Peter and going to Peter's second home, as it were, was quite amazing. It was quite amazing. So I think there was so much positiveness because of that, and it just continued throughout the whole trek. Okay,
so now the 25th arrived, Anzac Day. I understand you just finished the dawn service. What was the reaction, when it took place? I mean, were you shocked, Richard? I mean, because you haven't done mountaineering as much as Peter, I guess. What was your reaction to it? Were you completely terrified? I mean,
sure. Well, luckily there wasn't time to think whether you're terrified or not. It just, 50 seconds of just earthquake, quite amazing. And then the subsequent avalanche that hit. After it, certainly we then had concerns of everyone's safety on the mountain, not just us, and how we were going to get down. So, so there was concern after, but during, you just tried to survive that 2 or 3 minutes with the earthquake and the avalanche, I guess, Peter.
That's right. And I mean, when we did just decide to pack up and start heading down, I mean, the weather was bad, and that was one of the troubles for people up at Everest Base Camp. Not that we knew all about that at that time, but there was no possibility of helicopter evacuations. So we were heading down in driving snow, blizzard, and we've got all our waterproofs on. We're heading down. The ground is covered in sort of ice and snow. You got snowflakes in your face. I mean, we were a team, but the camaraderie in the group, we felt, didn't we? We're on a mission, and we're heading down to Pasang's house where we'd stayed a couple of days before. And when we got there, we all felt really good. We felt, no, this is great, a great step.
And even the people who were ailing with stomach complaints or chest infections, you didn't hear any misery. You just helped them naturally, and just all got to get down. It was quite amazing.
Yeah. Did you feel sort of comfort just being with such a legend like with Peter? Did you sort of, just because of his expertise, did you sort of feel more assured that you were with him?
Yes, and I think we were fortunate, and on reflection, certainly fortunate that Peter was with us, and maybe we didn't have a lot of the stress that other groups did have, because Peter, as I said, it's like his second backyard.
Yeah, I mean, look, it certainly wasn't an easy decision, because I mean, we know what happened now, but at the time we're standing there, you've had this earthquake, 7.8 earthquake, and the avalanche, but we had no knowledge of actually what had happened. We didn't know how big an earthquake it was. It might have just been one in that area. Maybe the avalanche hadn't even hit base camp. We didn't know. But as time went on, it became clear that we should head down. It was the right thing to do. And the further we went down, the more news we got about how bad this whole scenario was.
Because when it struck, you weren't actually at the base camp, right? You were 3 kilometers away, right?
2 hours from it.
Okay.
We were in our last eating lodges, or we were midday before going up when it struck.
Suppose you were actually there then, at base camp. I mean, could it have been a different story? Could it have been a different scenario?
Oh yes,
could it be quite fatal?
If we had been in that central area of base camp, which in fact was one of the places we intended to go, because the New Zealand group were there, and also the British SAS and Gurkha group, their base camp was there, and they were hit, and it was a devastating effect. Was
it quite traumatic? I mean, you go there for a holiday, just for a good time, and then you experience this, this destruction. I mean, did you take some time to sort of get over it, or were you just forced in that moment to harden up, sort of?
You harden up and get out, and it took us 5 days to get down. So that was on your mind, and as we could help people as we went down, and we took a young couple with us for the first 2 days. Remember that, Peter? Mm-hmm. Because they weren't with a leader like Peter, and we just swept them up, and there was suddenly 14 of us.
And they looked up to you as the leader, I guess, of the pack.
They did.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, we were so cohesive as a team. It gave us an incredible sense of inertia and confidence. And I just remember on the walk down on that first day, I mean, at first Pasang thought, oh, maybe we should just stay here and see what happens. And he said to me, we're heading in the right direction. Yep. And the further we went down, and the more destruction we saw, and the more terrible news that started to filter in from Kathmandu, we knew we were, we needed to move down. And for a while, we weren't even sure, when we should go out to Kathmandu, because, how bad was it? What was their infrastructure? And of course, while there was terrible damage, the basic infrastructure of the city had survived.
Plus, not only losing your friend Greg, losing the porter, how are you able to keep your cool through such a stressful time? I mean, how do you keep a level-headed
But you know, that's one of the great things about having a great team,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
in fact, we didn't necessarily keep our cool or remain level-headed. I just remember one moment, and Greg had died, and I'm up there, and there was John Rayburn. We're trying to get calls out on the phone, and I was talking to someone, and you know, the line dropped out, and you know, the emotions are high, and you're just going, what, you know, and every so often there'll be an aftershock, and you just think, this has gone from like a dream trip to a nightmare. And I just burst into tears. You know, it's just this great welling of emotion. And suddenly, Russell, I think, just, you know, a couple of people reached out, and there's hands on your shoulder, and you just think, no, we are a tight group, and we're going to work through it. So things were brimming over, but whenever it happened, there was support. And that's the secret.
I mean, what an ordeal, I guess. I mean, just tells you about life, how unexpected things can happen. Things can change in a fraction of a second, right?
But it was also, we were fine with Nepalese people who were just terrific people. They got this amazing deep-rooted faith that something like this should happen to them. I think a lot of our thoughts were sort of connected more to that than our own being or existence. So yeah, it was a lot of thoughts, emotions. Obviously, Peter had different thoughts and emotions because he was the leader, you know. But as Peter said, we all gelled to do it.
And I know you got a chance to meet Gambling as well. What was that like to sort of see him there? I know you. I think you went for the summit together to Mt Everest.
Well, Gambling and I have been on a lot of trips together. We've
Close friends, right?
We're good friends, and we have a great rapport. And yeah, Pasang, our Serdar, said, I'd like to know that Jamling's down there. So I ran across to this other lodge and walked through the door, and as I came through, there he was, and you know, it was great fun. So they came up and joined us that evening.
That's a special moment, right?
Well,
I mean, people
it
would
was,
yeah.
It was
and it was so good to see the Hillary Tenzing connection working again.
It was just serendipity, wasn't it? I mean, it just happened.
Yep.
Because he was leading a group as well, right? A
Yes,
tour
he was.
group to celebrate the anniversary of the first Indian climber.
Yeah, and they had a competition, and it was for young women, and there were 10 young women from all over India who had qualified and were doing this trek. So it was a lot of fun, and they were great fun, weren't they? All highly sophisticated, educated young women from around India, and so we had lots of great conversations. And as I said, we stayed up late, chatting into the night
till 9:30 as well.
9:30. Boy, that says something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, now you're here looking back, you know, at what's happened. I mean, you said there's going to be a sequel. I mean, how do you have that? How can you think like that? You know, aren't you nervous of another sort of disaster happening, or?
It will be well planned.
Yeah.
When you get there, I guess you deal with what happened, and you always hope for the best and plan for the worst. And Peter prepared us well for this trip. You know, and that's also what got us through this trip, and will get us through the next trip.
The thing is, you know, I mean, we're talking natural disasters like that. I mean, you could have flown down to see some friends and go for a walk in the Port Hills when the Christchurch earthquake happened. And, you know, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go to Christchurch again.
Exactly.
You know, you've sort of, it's like, I mean, all of us have had friends or even family members who've been in a traffic accident. And while it's certainly a good opportunity to take stock and think about, you know, should I drive like that? Or should I change some of my behaviors or assumptions? It's a good opportunity to do that, but it isn't necessarily right that you just go, I'll never drive a car again, or I'll never go to Christchurch again.
I mean, that's exactly what, you know, the heart of adventure, right? Seeking the unknown.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's how you deal with it, really.
Okay. And I guess what advice can you give people that are sort of in a situation where everything's going wrong? You know, how do you see the light at the end of the tunnel? What keeps you motivated, I guess?
You know, I think one of the things, it's like with the trip we've just had. You see, actually, Everett had gone off on this journey, a whole group of very successful businessmen catching up, rekindling this fraternity, and yet we're actually living very humbly. In the end, we were sleeping on the floor because the lodges were ruined. We were thankful for any food. You know, rice and lentils, that's perfect, that'll do. And a cup of tea.
Yep.
You know, all of a sudden you realise that you don't need all that stuff. You just need the basics. And so when stuff happens to you, the lesson you learn is that you just come down to the absolute essentials, and that'll get you through. Because you don't need to worry about all that other stuff. It's nice to have, you know, we all live in beautiful homes in a beautiful city, and we do all sorts of, you know, quite privileged things, but you don't need them to survive, and we needed to survive.
What about you, Richard? What sort of motivation would you give people under that crumbling situation?
Well, I think you have to have some type of faith that you'll get over your current predicament, and whether you go and seek help and other people to get you over that, or do it yourself, will be up to yourself. But there's always a better day out there, you know, and sometimes adversity makes you a better person. So you just keep going for life, live every day as it comes, and just keep going.
That's when you really discover yourself, right? Through adversity. I mean, when things are going great, you know, that's not the real way you discover yourself. When things are going wrong, that's when you actually...
That's right, and you can't, doesn't matter how much planning you do, some things you can't plan. They come at you left, right, and you haven't even thought about them. And as you say, I think once you deal with those, you're a better person because of it.
And how can people help, you know, if they want to support, you know, the Sherpas and what's happening in Nepal? Is there a website they can go to? Can you enlighten me?
Yeah, the Himalayan Trust website, which is, you know, www.himalayantrust.org. And of course that's the organisation my father, Sir Edmund Hillary, founded and ran all his life, and we continue to operate. You built 42 schools and hospitals, you know, amazing. Teacher training programs, and literally thousands of scholarships. So go and have a look at that website. You can make donations. There's a lot of rebuilding to do. We estimate possibly $1.5 million in school rebuilding alone around the region that we're going to try to address. There is a lot of work to be done, but I've got to say, the resilience of the Nepalese, just their spirit and their positivity, they're already seeing the good side of it and trying to make the most of it.
And just my last question, just because I've never met anyone that sort of reached the summit of Mount Everest, what is it like being up there?
Well, you know, it's a basket full of emotion because, you know, in a way you're thrilled to get there. You're relieved you don't have to go any further. You know, you're exhausted. You're scared about the descent because you know the terrain you have to descend, and descending is often quite dangerous because you're fatigued, your concentration often lapses, and you know, frankly, it doesn't matter whether you fall off on the way up or the way down. You die if you make a mistake. So you feel very aware of that sort of stuff. But obviously, you're thrilled to be there. But you're even more thrilled, actually, to get down to base camp. That's where the job is done.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Peter. I'm a great fan of the Hillarys, and you know, it's an honor to meet you. Yeah, very glad you gave me this time. So thank you.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.